All right, now we're going to look at function rules. Function rules are similar to the sequence rules that we just covered. So like writing a variable expression, a function is going to be an expression just using y and x to describe the situation. Okay, now a function rule is a relationship that assigns one output for every input. So we put in a value for our x variable and we only get one value for our y. Okay, now this is made up of independent variables and dependent variables. So the independent variable is a variable that does not depend on the other. So it doesn't matter what you put in for x. What is going to matter is your y value for that x value. So for the dependent variable, that's going to be y. This one is dependent on what your x value is. Okay, so the input determines the output. So think of y equals 4x plus 3. Okay, so now whatever you put in here for x is going to determine what your y is. Because if x is 2, y can only be one value, which is 4 times 2 plus 3, which would be 11. Sorry, that one's independent. This one's dependent. Okay, so right here, this is an example of a function. We've got our output, which is our y, our dependent variable, and that is equal to 4. So 4 would refer to like a constant change that we're seeing. So this would be like the pattern in the number sequence. What do we continually add to get the next value? And then this would just be something you need to add to make that sequence true. In this case, something we have to add to make our values true for y. And we'll get into that a little bit more when we get down to the tables. Okay, so then write a function. So now we want to be able to write a function to describe. So think of this as our sequence rule in a sense. Okay, except it wants us to write a function, so y equals between the money made and the time worked if a person makes $20 an hour. So y equals, so we want to show that it's $20 each hour they work. So there's 20 times x. So this x would be number of hours worked. And y would be our money made. So you'll see the money you make depends on the number of hours you work. And so we can fill this out. We can find out what you make depending on the number of hours you work by putting in just different numbers for the number of hours. So here, if you work 1 hour, you get y equals 20 times 1, which equals 20. Y equals, so now let's do 2 hours. You get, you get y equals 20. Now we're doing 2 hours, so you're going to multiply 20 by 2, and you get 40. Let's do, if you work 3 hours, you get y equals 20 times 3, and you get 60. Okay, and so you could continue, and you'll notice that this is just taking 2 times 4 out of 0, so that'd be 80. This would be 100. So this is a function that shows us the amount of money you make depending on the number of hours you work. And you are given this constant that you make per hour. Okay, so now we're going to kind of take this, or we're going to find a function rule for the values in a table. So y equals something x. and maybe plus something. But the way we're going to determine this is we need to find what our constant change is. And our constant change refers to the difference in our y values. So 0 to -4, that's a change of -4. From -4 to -8, that's -4 again. A -8 to -12, that's -4 again. So our constant change is -4. Okay, now just like the number sequence, we can plug in a value for x and see if we get our corresponding y value here. So when x equals 0, our value should be 0. So 0 equals 4 times 0. This does equal 0, so that checks out. So then this is all we need for our function. Y equals -4x. So we're looking at the constant change in y, or the difference from one y to the next. And one thing to note is that works when our x are consecutive numbers. So we go 0, 1, 2, 3. There's a little change if these were not consecutive that we'll cover in the next lesson. Okay, same thing. Note we've got consecutive numbers for our x value. So now we're going to look at the constant change from one y to the next. So you go from -3 to -1. That's an increase of 2. So you're adding 2. So now from -1 to 1, that's another increase of 2, or adding 2. 1 to 3, that's another increase of 2. So now our constant change is 2. So now we can write our value, y is equal to our constant change times x. Okay, now we want to once again just plug in and see if this is all we need. So we know that y equals -3 when x equals 0. So we get -3 is equal to 0. That is not true. So this tells us that we need to add a plus b to get it to be true. So we can still use this. All we do is add this plus b, and so now we can make this true by saying -3 is equal to 0 plus b. Well, 0 plus b is just b, so -3 is equal to b. So now we take our equation, y equals our constant change times x minus 3. So plus b plus a -3 would be the same as -3. So there we have our function rule from this table. So if you'll notice, it is pretty similar to finding a variable, writing a variable expression with sequences. Now it's just in the form of y and x. Instead of term number n is equal to whatever that constant change is times n. Okay, so last thing we're going to look at is we're given our function value here, and we want to know what our outcome is going to be for given x's. So in this case, 2, 5, and 8. So all we do, we're just going to take our equation and plug in these values for x. So first one is 2, so that's 12 minus 2 times 2. That would be 12 minus 4, which equals 8. So this would be our first value for when x is 2. Next one, same thing, y equals 12 minus 2 times our new x, which is 5. This is going to be 12 minus 10, which equals 2. So that is when x equals 5. Last one, y equals 12 minus 2 times 8. This is going to be 12 minus 16, which equals -4. So that's our value when x is -8. Okay, last one. Go ahead and find your answers for 3, 7, and 9. Pause the video and then check back in when you're done. See if you got the same thing I did. All right, so y is going to equal 4 times 3 plus 2. So this is going to be 12 plus 2, which equals 14. So 14 goes with 3. Y equals 4 times, now our x is 7 plus 2. This is going to give us 28 plus 2. So that would equal 30. Okay, and then last one now, we're just going to plug in 9 for x. Follow the equation, y equals 4. Our x now is 9 plus 2. 4 times 9 is 36. Plus 2, that's going to equal 38. And that's what we're going to be looking at doing with finding our function rule from either a given table, from a word problem, or what are values given a function rule for certain values of x.